Borthakur IAS Academy. Prostuti aru adhyayanor nirbhorjogyo thikona. Borthakur IAS Academy.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu analysis for 23rd June 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. Gupkar Alliance leaders decide to attend meeting with Prime Minister Modi. So Prime Minister Modi has called for an all-party meeting regarding Jammu and Kashmir. Now, this all-party meeting is significant because post the dissolve of Article 370 and the subsequent actions taken by the central government in regards to Jammu and Kashmir, either it may be the repeal of its statehood and so on and so forth, has played a significant part in the regional political dimension of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, this meet is significant because on the eve of Independence Day last year, Prime Minister had promised that elections will be held in Jammu and Kashmir after the completion of delimitation process in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So the track record has been, or the promised path has been that first we are going to conduct a delimitation process. After that, we are going to conduct elections. After the completion of elections, we'll rethink about the bestowing or restoring the statehood of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, that has been the three-stage process that was proposed by the central government. But the regional parties have been pushing back for more, stating that you have to restore Article 370, you have to bring back the constitution of Jammu and Kashmir, and you have to bring back the state of Jammu and Kashmir to its original state. Now, from every source that has certain knowledge in this regard, at this point of time, the central government is not going to repeal the dissolution of Article 370. As far as the statehood is concerned in terms of Jammu and Kashmir, it can only happen according to the central government's opinion after the delimitation process and successful conclusion of legislative elections in Union Territories of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, this has been the process. I think after this meet, the delimitation process, which is very crucial for conducting of elections in Jammu and Kashmir, is going to start. Now, what is delimitation process? So, the Delimitation Act is nothing but redrawing boundaries for an assembly or Lok Sabha seat to represent changes in population over time. Now, who conducts or who carries out the delimitation process? The delimitation process is carried out by a commission called Delimitation Commission. The speciality of this commission is such that it has absolute power, meaning the Delimitation Commission's orders have the force of law and cannot be questioned before any court. So their powers are absolute. The objective here is to, using the 2011 census, because due to COVID-19, the recent censuses which were supposed to be conducted in 2020 and 2021 were postponed to next year. So we don't have that data. So the Delimitation Commission has said that they are going to, or it was assumed that if the delimitation process indeed does take place in Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, they are going to use 2011 census and accordingly they are going to conduct the delimitation process. Now, they use the 2011 census and the objective is to redraw the boundaries so that there is an equal representation of seats across the Union Territory. Now, they are not only going to change the limits of the constituency, meaning certain constituencies are going to grow bigger, certain constituencies are going to grow smaller, meaning they are going to lose boundaries. The boundary may be readjusted to reflect the realities of the ground according to the 2011 census. And the subsequent result is going to be that there will be a change in number of seats in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir itself. If it's not Jammu and Kashmir, if it is being done in any other parts, for example, Assam is being talked right now, it is going to have the same impact on the state also. So this is going to be different from whatever the delimitation exercises that were conducted in Jammu and Kashmir in the past, because remember, Jammu and Kashmir had their own constitution, and Jammu and Kashmir had Jammu and Kashmir Representation of People Act of 1957. Now what was happening was, when the rest of the country was going through the delimitation process based on regions, their own regional disparities, due to the special status of Jammu and Kashmir, delimitation of Lok Sabha seats in Jammu and Kashmir was governed by Constitution in India, but the delimitation of the States Assembly, see, when it came to Lok Sabha seats, the Constitution of India was functioning there. But when it came to the delimitation of the State Assembly seats, that delimitation process was governed by Jammu and Kashmir Constitution and Jammu and Kashmir Representation of People's Act of 1957. Though the meeting is significant, we are not worried about the political aspect of it, but we are concerned about what is going to be the outcome of the meeting. That is, the start of delimitation process of Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, successfully conducting assembly elections or Lok Sabha elections in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, post-elections, restoring statehood for Jammu and Kashmir. This would be the timeline that the central government is suggesting. And as far as the Delimitation Act process itself is concerned, these are the details. Moving on to the next article, 8 rare pygmy hogs released in Manas National Park. So for the past few years, the Assam Forest Department along with few other NGOs have been carrying out a conservation project called Pygmy Hog Conservation Program. The idea is to reintroduce the rarest and smallest wild pigs, that is pygmy hogs, into the wilds or the forest areas of Assam. These are a threatened species around the world, particularly in India. Their number is very low. So for the past few years, they captured few wild 2 males and 4 females from forest, and pretty much have been carrying out a captive breeding program for pygmy hogs. In 2008, they started reintroducing for the first time into the wilds of Assam, or the wildlife sanctuaries of Assam and national parks of Assam. This was in 2008, but the problem was this particular breeding program to protect this endangered species had begun in Banswari range of Manas National Park in 1996, because they captured, as I said earlier, 2 males and 4 females to initiate and start a captive breeding program. In 2008, they released some into Sonai Rupai Wildlife National Park, Orang National Park and other national parks. Recently, they started reintroducing the same pygmy hogs into Manas National Park. 12 were bred this time, out of which 8 were released yesterday and 4 will be released on June 25th. So again, this is to reintroduce the rarest of the pygmy hogs which are endangered around the world into the wilds of Assam. This is a good news in terms of conservation. I have to say I'm pretty happy with how the Assam government is carrying out conservative efforts in terms of reintroducing wildlife into endemic species into the forests of Assam, protecting forest land, elevating the status of parks from state parks to national parks, increasing the number of conservation efforts or programs in the state itself. This is a welcome sign that other states must adopt to protect the biodiversity of their respective states and India as a whole. Moving on to the next article, policy creep. So yesterday we were talking about how Amazon and Flipkart are battling out with the central government in the courts of India. Both Flipkart and Amazon are accused of subverting the national laws, particularly the competition laws in India, meaning they were not adhering to the competition laws. The Competition Commission of India initiated a probe into their business practices, which they tried to get it stopped through courts, where the court observed that you cannot stop these kinds of investigation. You have to allow this investigation to take place. Now, it has been more than 11 months since the Government of India first time notified the Consumer Protection e-commerce rules of 2020. Now, these rules were released by or notified by Department of Consumer Affairs, and now after 11 months, the Department of Consumer Affairs is considering a set of new amendments to the rules notified in 2020. What are the new amendments that are being proposed? The first and foremost is a norm stipulating the appointment of a chief compliance officer. Now, this chief compliance officer would be a nodal contact person for 24/7 coordination with law enforcement agencies. The second would be requiring e-commerce entities offering imported goods or services to incorporate filter mechanism to identify goods based on country of origin and suggest alternatives to ensure a fair opportunity to domestic goods. This option has been in the asking for a long time, because people were asking, we want to know where the products are coming from. We want to know the origin of products. You need to give consumers the choice to choose from which country they want to buy the product from. They don't, particularly given the anti-Chinese sentiments or highly negative Chinese sentiments in India right now, people are searching for products that are not originating from China. Particularly, I have been looking into companies that are Indian companies, though the price might be higher, but I am looking to support Indian companies. So this option would certainly help me, because I don't want to buy any Chinese goods and I want to support a local manufacturer, which is pretty hard to find right now, because you don't have services like Amazon or Flipkart or any other e-platforms providing the option to filter searches based on country of origin of the product. So I have to look for other sources like Instagram, where people do tend to post products, but the searching for particular product is very hard on these platforms. So this will certainly help me, because I am trying to support Indian companies and independent companies, and this certainly would help people like me and people like you. So this option is really welcoming. The third would be a fallback liability on online marketplaces in the event of non-delivery of goods or services to the consumer. So this is also a good, you need some sort of liability to ensure quality and safety of the consumer itself. You have to look at the end of the day, consumer reigns supreme. You have to protect the interests of the consumer, because they are your citizens. Now the fourth would be that registration also be made mandatory for all e-commerce players. Now, yesterday we heard how government is trying to end the concept of flash sales, back-to-back sales, and so on and so forth. Again, according to these amended rules, it might be prudent to think otherwise. They are going to end the flash sales and back-to-back sales. And in addition to all of this, all the entities must provide information within 72 hours on any request made by authorized government agency probing any breach of law, including cybersecurity issues. See, the concept of cybersecurity issue has been added recently. The need for information to law enforcement agencies, or particularly investigation agencies, is because, remember Pulwama? One of the terrorists in Pulwama used Amazon to buy clocking mechanisms and aluminium powder for bomb making. So that's a national security issue. You need to have certain information accessed by investigation agencies or certain law enforcement agencies to prevent such things from happening again. As far as the cybersecurity issue, we are seeing hundreds and thousands of breaches that are happening on a daily basis on private companies, where hackers are accessing these private companies' database and stealing people's identity, people's credit and debit card details, bank details, and this is a big liability for consumer protection and their right to privacy. Data protection is also an integral part of this, right? Now coming back to the Walmart's owned Flipkart and Amazon issue, they are currently battling the central government in courts against the Competition Commission's probe, because they are alleged to do certain practices or implement certain practices in their business dealings that are against the competition laws of India and fairness. Now they are accused of pricing practice, because these pricing practice, when you observe it from from a neutral point of view, they look to be skewed to favor select sellers on their platforms, and their discounting policies also hurt offline retailers. Now, these changes that the central government through the Department of Consumer Affairs is asking will ensure that none of the e-commerce entities or related parties and associated enterprises that are enlisted on the platform as seller for sale of consumers directly are not related to the company itself, right? That is what is happening. So this would certainly impact platforms which are doing these kinds of practices, which are anti-competition and anti-fairness in terms of offline retailers. And this would certainly bring a lot of oversight of government on e-commerce platforms also. So these are the new e-commerce rules or amendments that the central government is bringing to have an oversight over e-commerce platforms like the IT rules of 2021. Moving on, a welcome spy. So yesterday we saw that India had administered 8.6 million doses, that is 85 lakh doses in a single day. Today the number has sharply decreased to 50 lakhs, meaning today 5.2 million doses were only Tuesday were administered. So that is a shortfall of around 2.3 million doses in a single day. But nonetheless, the number is welcome. When you compare it with other countries, we were only able to vaccinate only 17% of our population with at least one dose and less than 4% by 2 doses. When you compare that numbers with US and UK, their number stands at 53% with single dose and 64% with single dose. That is far higher, but they have their own, at the end of the day, you cannot compare their population density to our population density. Comparison is good to a certain extent. Beyond that, it becomes stupidity. Yes, you have to understand and compare with countries that are doing far better than what you are doing. But beyond a point, that comparison becomes stupidity. But nonetheless, this comparison is good. You have to compare because we are very, very, very well less compared to our Western counterparts. Now, what is the ground reality here? Everybody is saying, as I said earlier or yesterday, the third wave is inevitable. Is India prepared for a third wave? The answer seems to be a bit of yes and no. In terms of facilities and healthcare infrastructure, yes. In terms of preventing hospitalization and infections, no, because our vaccination percentage is very low. The idea is not to brace ourselves for a third or fourth wave. The idea should be prevention of hospitalization in a third or fourth wave. And prevention of hospitalization happens only through vaccination. Now states have lifted or have been conducting mass vaccination drives, and certain states have lifted the restrictions on registration of CoWIN platform, meaning 18 to 44 year olds can get spot registration for vaccination. Now this spot registration allows for people who fall between the 18 to 44 years to reach a vaccination spot and get registered then and there and get their first dose or second dose. Now our entire vaccination drive is dependent on Covishield, followed by Covaxin, and now we are seeing the introduction of Sputnik 5. the manufacturers of Covaxin have promised that they are going to match the supplies of Covishield by the end of August, meaning that they are going to supply as many doses as Covishield is supplying right now. And if Sputnik 5 clears all the legal hurdles and the regulatory hurdles, Sputnik 5 is also going to boost our vaccination drive. There are certain challenges, but we'll try to, the government is trying to overcome it, but not in time. It is going to take a longer period than what we are expecting it to be. As far as the third wave, things are looking good, but not in terms of vaccination, but in terms of healthcare infrastructure. But nobody can tell what will be the end result of this if and when the third wave indeed comes. Because remember, the Delta Plus variant is a cause of concern for central government. We'll read about it in the next few articles. How Delta variant has wreaked havoc currently in the second wave. The Delta Plus variant, AY1 mutation of the current Delta variant, is cause of concern for the third wave. So moving on, Afghan violence has risen according to Jaishankar. So our External Affairs Minister was speaking at the UN Security Council at a special meeting that was held on Tuesday. And his opinion was clear that the talks between Afghan government and Taliban have not resulted in any reduction in violence. Instead, it had an opposite effect, because since the US announcement of withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan before September 11th, we have consistently seen the percentage of violence in Afghanistan increase day by day. Now, he reiterated India's stance that India supports the intra-Afghan negotiations and called for an United Nations to play a leading role in reconciliation process. He reiterated that violence has only increased, especially after May 1, where the US made announcement that they are going to pull out of Afghanistan. Now, the problem with Afghanistan right now is there has been, as I said earlier, there has been consistent targeted attacks on religious and ethnic minorities, girl students particularly, and Afghan security forces are also underperforming in this particular situation because of their own challenges. Now, this is our statement here, meaning that we are concerned about what will happen if and when United States pull out of Afghanistan. That is India's stand. We are calling for presence of UN peacekeeping troops on ground in Afghanistan to prevent civil war from happening. But as far as that proposal goes, it is to be further discussed in the United Nations forum before any decision is being taken. Now, United States has this UN assistance mission in Afghanistan, which promised that they are going to train Afghan security forces. As far as the United States stand, they are sticking to their stance that they are going to pulling out of troops. Even the American envoy defended the US move to pull troops out of Afghanistan because they say that it was a fully considered decision, but simultaneously warned the Taliban that taking military path would not bring the group legitimacy. So we'll discuss that in the next article. No military solution to Afghan situation, US tells Taliban. So the United States ambassador, UN ambassador particularly, told Taliban that there is no military solution in Afghanistan, meaning they are asking Taliban to shed the military path or the resistance path, that offensive and resistance path that they have taken towards Afghanistan. In her speech, she directed her speech directly towards Taliban, stating that to the Taliban, we reiterate that the military path will not lead to a legitimacy. As many of us have stated, including my colleagues on this Council of Europe, Russia and China, there is no military solution in Afghanistan. Now they are calling for the parties that are in conflict, that is the Afghan government and Taliban, to move forward and move forward for a peaceful resolution and beyond the violence. As far as will Taliban listen to the request of United States government, the answer seems to be no, because yesterday they conducted a successful offensive against the Afghan security forces and captured a border crossing. Now the problem is the US intelligence agencies and defense establishments are still working out a lot of details as to how will they gather intelligence and conduct counter-terrorism operations in Afghanistan after September 11. NATO and UN committed that they are going to train the Afghan security forces after the troop withdrawal of September 11 from the country. But the problem is, for many of the countries, the problem seems to be what kind of new terrorist forces are going to come out of Afghanistan once the troop withdrawal takes place, because there will be a certain vacuum left, and in many cases bad faith actors tend to occupy these vacuum spaces, and those do not bode well for the nations, particularly neighboring nations. Now again, the US seems to be engaging with Taliban, and their request seems to be that you have to shed violence and come to a mainstream political process, but things are not looking in that direction. So moving on to the next, as I said earlier, Taliban capture Afghanistan main Tajikistan border crossing. So yesterday, Taliban forces and Afghan security forces fought a short battle, and Taliban had successfully captured Afghanistan main border crossing with Tajikistan, and some security forces of Afghanistan had abandoned their post and fled across the frontier, meaning they fled into Tajikistan. Now the seizure of Sher Khan Bandar, which is the main border crossing for Afghanistan into Tajikistan, which is 50 kilometers away from Kunduz city, is the most significant gain for Taliban since US announced its troop withdrawal in May. So this is the ground situation. Now, this is going to be the norm from henceforth. We are going to see more and more cases of Taliban either capturing and Afghan security forces either abandoning or being overrun by Taliban in certain parts of the country. So moving on, world's first GM rubber sapling planted in Assam. So the rubber board research farm, which is situated outskirts of Guwahati, now has the world's first genetically modified rubber plant that is specifically tailored for the climatic conditions of the Northeast. Now what is so different about this rubber plant? Now this GM rubber plant has additional copies of the gene called MnSOD, or manganese containing superoxide dismutase, which is inserted into the plant, and the idea is that this particular gene of MnSOD will help the plant to survive in severe cold conditions during winter, which is a major fact affecting the growth of young rubber plants in this particular region. Remember, rubber plants are native to warm, humid Amazon forests and not naturally suited for colder conditions of Northeast. Now with this genetic modification gene of MnSOD, they don't need warm and humid Amazonian forest conditions to grow. They can grow in colder conditions of Northeast. Now the plant was developed by Kerala-based Rubber Research Institute of India, where it is being planted in Guwahati at a rubber board research farm. What is the gene that is being edited or added here? MnSOD. Moving on to the next article, House Panel for Study on Malnutrition. A Parliament panel on Tuesday has asked the Ministry of Women and Child Development to conduct a survey on the impact of pandemic on Anganwadi services and malnutrition levels among children. So what is the committee that had asked the ministry for this report? The Parliamentary Standing Committee on Education, Women, Children, Youth and Sports had asked officials and the ministry to conduct this study to address the need of the marginalized at this critical juncture. Now, isn't the government doing anything to address these issues? No, the government has already launched an app called Portion Tracker to monitor the delivery services at 14 lakh Anganwadi officials, and the data has yet to be uploaded from this app from these centers. Now the officials said that they are going to start uploading data from June 1 alone, but the panel was not happy with the reply given by the government officials. Now, as far as the malnutrition thing is concerned, there are certain petitions in front of the Supreme Court addressing the same issue, but the Supreme Court has yet to take up those petitions. But nonetheless, though the Portion Tracker app has been launched, the data has yet to be collected and uploaded into the app itself, and we don't have any concrete steps or statistic as to what is the ground reality of these children in Anganwadi centers. Moving on to the next article, Delta Plus variant is a variant of concern, government. Now, the central government on Tuesday clearly indicated that the emerging Delta Plus variant, the AY1 variant of the mutation of the coronavirus, is a variant of concern. Why it is a variant of concern? Because it carries the highest threat perception of a coronavirus variant, which is characterized by increased ineffectivity, increased transmissibility, or resistance to vaccine and treatment. We know that the Delta variant has been a variant of concern because it has been found in 80 countries right now. The World Health Organization has also issued guidelines to Southeast Asian countries. The European Union also had received certain suggestions from World Health Organization asking them to monitor the mutation and development and transmission of Delta variant in those countries. As far as the Delta Plus variant, it has been seen only in 9 countries till now, India being one of them. Again, World Health Organization is also tracking the transmission of this particular mutation. As far as how India is tracking this genome, we have the consortium called INSACOG, which is Indian SARS-CoV-2 Genomic Consortium. That AY1 was always a variant of concern, but was wrongly classified by the Health Ministry according to some unnamed sources. But at least now we have AY1 variant. It seems that there was also a AY2 variant which directly derived from the Delta variant. So it looks like third wave is going to have some bearing. AY1 and AY2 at least will have some sort of a bearing on our third wave. Moving on to the next article, at UNHRC, grave concerns raised over Xinjiang province. Now, yesterday, the United Nations Human Rights Council has raised grave concerns at Chinese actions in Xinjiang, Hong Kong and Tibet, which triggered a severe backlash from the Beijing, that is the Chinese. So this statement has been in the works for the last few weeks. This was widely anticipated that the UNHRC is going to release a joint statement very critical of the Chinese, and this statement was released or delivered on the day 2 of the 47th session of the council that is taking place in Geneva. What does the statement say? The statement states that we are gravely concerned about the human rights situation in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, according to the Canadian ambassador. The statement was backed by Australia, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Spain and the US among others. 40 countries have backed this statement. Now, the statement has also called for China to allow UN inspectors or the UN rights chief to conduct an independent study or independent investigation into this human rights violations accusation. But that is not going to happen because China is stating that it's a matter of their sovereignty and United Nations Human Rights Council has no bearing over their country. That is a issue. This is in line where various international organizations and countries have been raising voice over or concerns over human rights violation in the Uyghur province or Muslim Uyghur province of Xinjiang. Moving on to the next article, International Tea Day auction sets price record. So the first International Tea Day special auction, which was held on a digital platform in eastern Assam of Jorhat, which is considered the tea capital of the region itself, fetched record prices for tea. According to the reports, more than 93% of the total tea that was offered for sale have been sold to buyers from Assam, Delhi, Gujarat, Rajasthan and West Bengal. Now the auction was conducted on June 21st, and it seems that this type of sale or this type of mechanism to sell the tea produced from these regions has been a great success. So this is the first time that they are trying to sell tea through an e-commerce platform, that too particularly a business-to-business e-commerce platform. So moving on, tying reforms incentives helped widen adoption. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi released a statement through LinkedIn, which is a job search and social media networking portal. Yes, it seems that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has an account on LinkedIn, so try to search for it and follow there also. I don't think Prime Minister leaves any social media account for imagination. So nonetheless, moving on. So the Prime Minister noted that the states were able to borrow an extra 1.6 lakh crore in financial year of 21. The reason seems to be that, or his assumption seems to be that, their idea, or the central government's idea of tying up certain reforms in policies with increased or additional borrowing capabilities had borne fruits. So for example, in May of 2021, under Atmanirbhar Bharat package, the central government had permitted states to borrow an additional 2% of gross state domestic product, but half of it was contingent on implementation of 4 specified reforms, and according to central government's data, 23 states availed of additional borrowing of 1.6 lakh crore out of the potential 2.1 lakh crore that was allocated. Now, what are these 4 reforms that the central government is asking states to adopt? The first one is 17 states that facilitated ration card portability and installed electronic point of sale devices at fair price shops were granted additional borrowings amount to 37,000 crore, and similarly 20 states completed reforms to ease the red tape faced by businesses to avail additional borrowings of 39,000 crore. So reforms were being tied up with additional borrowings, and it seems that certain states have taken that condition to their own advantage. The third reform was that required states to notify floor rates for property tax and water and sewage charges in consonance with stamp duty guidelines, values for property transactions and current cost respectively. And it seems that 11 states have completed these reforms and were granted additional borrowing of 15,957 crore, and he is indicating that this is a step where reforms were tied to certain incentives, and this bore more fruit than what policies that were adopted by previous governments and previous administrations. So he is saying that when we tied reforms with incentives, the adoption rate was higher. So that is the essence of the article here. And the additional important factor is the states were able to borrow an extra 1.6 lakh crore in financial year of 2021. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা
Borthakur IAS Academy.